Hey guys, let's talk about this week's episode of The Originals. And oh my gosh, this show is so good right now. There are no words. It's just so good. From start to finish, I was completely engaged, and the ending, oh my lord. Let's just say it, guys. The Originals has stood out from the beginning, and it is just on its path to a great first season. And tonight's episode was no different. I mean, holy cannoli. Um, Basically, Celeste has a plan that has been set in motion from the beginning of this season, and it is very nice to see it playing out. And once Papa Tunde died in last week's episode, that meant that they needed to fill his spot as having another witch be brought back from the harvest. And who does that turn out to be? Monique. And Monique, of course, is the niece of Sophie Devereaux. And Sophie has been trying for a while now to resurrect her niece. And when it actually happens, she is beyond thrilled. And a lot of stuff get in the way of this happy reunion, but it is just a thrilling ride. So, of course, all of our witches are out for blood and revenge, and all of our vampires are trying to prevent all of this from happening. So, of course, we start off the episode and they find Papa Tunde's body. So they quickly realize that if he has died and Monique has resurrected, then that means that with every dying witch that was originally resurrected, then they will be able to bring back another witch from the harvest. And of course, this makes Marcel very happy because he desperately wants to get Davina back. And you know he really cares about her, and it has nothing to do with whether or not she'll be able to control all the witches when she's back. It's about just getting her back because he made a promise to her and he said that he would be able to protect her, and unfortunately he wasn't. And you can really tell in Marcel's eyes that he just wants to get Davina back, and that's really great to see. So of course they're off and running, and Marcel basically goes to Sophie and asks her if they can do a locator spell. Now, one of the other reasons why Marcel wants this to happen is because one of the other four witches that was resurrected was a woman named Genevieve. And apparently she has something to do with what was done many hundreds of years ago to, I guess, the Michelson family. And she probably has a hand in returning Michael Michelson, which is Klaus's father, to New Orleans, and which ultimately ran them out of town. So I think that, of course, Marcel doesn't want this secret to come out. So he finds Rebecca and tells her that he believes he saw Genevieve come back, and they need to get a hold of her so that the secret that they've been keeping all these years doesn't come out. So he has obviously two reasons to do this locator spell. So one of the things that happened when Monique came back was she just seemed a little off. She didn't really seem thrilled to be back. She didn't really seem like she was happy to see her aunt. She didn't seem like she was like, oh my God, I need to get away from these witches. I gotta, stay away from these vampires. She just seemed very blah. And so you could tell that something deeper was going on with her. And so that was sort of a thread that was happening throughout the episode. And I'll get back to what ultimately happens at the end with her. But, it was very obvious that she was not herself. So many other things were going on in this episode. And we had a woman named Bastina, who was one of the witches that was resurrected. And she was a witch that we saw earlier on in the season. And she put a hex on Father Kieran, and this was the same hex that was done to his nephew, which was also Cammie's brother, which turned him kind of crazy and made him massacre all the people in the church, and ultimately ended up in his death. So now Kieran has been cursed with the same hex, and he is fearful that he's going to go on the same rampage as his nephew. So he goes to Cammie to tell her the truth, and so of course Cammie goes to Klaus to ask him if he can help cure her uncle and get this hex taken off. So he does this, tries to get the vervain out of his system and have him drink his blood, and it works, but it doesn't really fully work. So she still needs to try and get to the witches so that they can save her uncle. Now, one of the things that also happened is that Genevieve had given Sophie the knife that was used in last week's episode to kill Papatunde, that has basically all of the spiritual souls of the vampires. And she was told that if you drive this knife into the heart of Klaus, then I will remove the hex from your uncle. So of course, Cammy was supposed to do that, and she doesn't. Instead, she gives the knife to Klaus. And this is obviously going to cause some issues once it's revealed that Klaus now has the knife. So lots of twists and turns in this episode, people, lots. And of course, there's ultimately this showdown between Klaus and Marcel because, Klaus is trying to do what he can to save Kieran, and in doing so, when he fails, he basically goes to Sophie and he grabs her niece Monique and he says, I'm taking her for leverage. And of course, Marcel's like, we don't use children as leverage, like this isn't who we are. And they get into a fight and he snaps his neck, and in this whole argument he drops the knife, and when he turns around, Sophie stabs him through the chest. And I thought that this was really cool. So we were told that this knife would be able to cause immeasurable pain to an original, and it would make them kind of powerless. So we see this knife enter into Klaus's chest, and it just devours. It basically sinks right into his chest, and he's screaming in agony, and he can't take it out, and he ultimately collapses to the floor. So basically, Klaus is out for the count, and he's going to be taken now by Bastina. So of course, Rebecca is off with Haley, and Haley, it also just turns out that tonight was going to be a full moon, and we all know that there was a hex put on her family, and which is basically the reverse. So the werewolves would be werewolves 360 days of the year until there, or whatever number of days through the year, until there was a full moon, and in that full moon they would turn human just for that night, and then they would turn back into werewolves. So she ultimately wants to get rid of that curse which has been put on her family. So she says to Rebecca, I want you to help me throw a party so that I can get all of my werewolf friends over here so that I can finally see them in person and I can introduce myself, and we can have conversations, whatever. So in doing so, Rebecca is at the house, and when these werewolves turn, there has been this werewolf that has sort of been following Haley over the last few episodes, and we've seen it protecting her, but we didn't really know who, of course, and why. So, of course, in this episode, we find out that a werewolf's name is Jackson, and his family and Haley's family are like one of the original werewolf families, and their lineage, they basically were two separate werewolf tribes, I guess, and they ultimately decided that they were going to strengthen the bloodlines, and they were going to have their son and their daughter marry so that they would go on and procreate and create this stronger line of werewolves. And so he's basically been betrothed to Haley. So when we find this out, it's like, what? And let's just say he's kind of a cutie. So, obviously she had no idea that all this was in the works from back in the day. And so to find this out, and obviously we all know that she's totally crushing on Elijah, and Elijah is totally crushing on her. So this obviously puts an obstacle in between the two of them. I'm not a huge fan of triangles when they feel forced. And this kind of feels like, ooh, this is a very interesting plot twist, and we'll see where this goes, because what I really like with this show is we have a lot of different things going on. Ultimately, at the beginning, we had the struggle for power between Marcel and Klaus, and now they've sort of mended fences and they're working on the same team. And then of course we still have the internal struggle between the Michelson family. Rebecca feels like she's always on the outside of Klaus and Elijah, and so she's struggling for power within her own siblings. But ultimately, the werewolves have now banded together, and they're sort of all working on the same side. And then we have the witches who are trying to come here and take over. And then we also have the werewolves who are trying to get back their home, their land, and, become one. And because there was all this infighting with the werewolves, they were not able to take on the vampires when the vampires took over New Orleans all those years ago, and were able to put these curses and hexes and blah, blah, blah on them. So it seems like we have all these different things happening, these different tribes, these different packs, these different, groups of supernatural beings that are their own struggling within themselves, but they ultimately have to become a unit to be able to take out everybody else. So while all this is going on, of course, Sabine slash Celeste has been doing her crazy stuff. So in this episode, we finally get the reveal from Elijah that he realizes that Celeste is in Sabine's body. So they're taking this stroll down the street, and she's giving this tour of what she does to all these tourists, and he basically calls her out and says, listen, I know you're Celeste. And so they have this really great conversation, and she ultimately says, I'm not going to kill you, but what I am going to do is make you pay. Well, not really pay, but I'm going to teach you a lesson for always siding with your brother and pretty much being his co-signer and basically always being his enabler all these years. Like, he does these horrible things, and you always forgive him, and you always will choose family over no matter what. And because of that, I died. And so, of course, she's very upset because she died at the hands of Klaus. And she gives him this kiss, and it's like the kiss of poison. So he collapses to the floor, and she ultimately tells him, listen, something's going to happen to Rebecca, something's going to happen to Klaus, and something's going to happen to Haley. And we'll see which of those three you go to save, because you can only save one, and the other two will be in great peril, and it'll be a very telling tale to see who you ultimately choose. And she's really just trying to teach him a lesson. And she's just trying to say, listen, your brother needs to learn a thing or two. And that is that he's not always going to have people there to back him up. So, of course, Klaus is left on the streets. Elijah's left on the streets. And Sabine goes off / Celeste. And she's off doing her plan. So while Haley is getting this family history with this very cute boy named Jackson, all of a sudden, the windows close, the doors close, and the house gets set on fire. And then, of course, Rebecca, who is never, ever, ever lucky in love, she has no luck with boys. She starts flirting with this boy at the party who's a werewolf. And it turns out that he obviously was sent there to distract Rebecca so that he could lure all the other werewolves who have turned on this full moon day. And they've surrounded her so she can't get away. And they've basically attacked her. So now Rebecca's down for the count. Haley's in a burning building, and Klaus has a dagger through his chest, and he's screaming, and he's passed out in pain. So all of the Michelsons are out for the count, and Haley is down for the count as well. So when Elijah comes to, who does he go to save? Shocker, Haley. So he busts through the glass, he saves her friend Jackson, and they get out. So now, of course, Elijah's, trying to figure out where his brother is. He goes to see Marcel. He has a little bit of a freak out on Marcel. It's like, dude, your brother's the one who attacked me as per usual. He freaked and he snapped my neck. And then all the witches, took him on, and he lost that battle. So now they have to try to find Klaus and Rebecca. So, of course, we're left with this OMG moment. Like, where is this going to lead? And, of course, Celeste and her pack of witches, their plan has pretty much gone forward without any hitches. So now we're at the end of the episode, and Sophie rightfully is like, look, Monique, we need to get out of Dodge because I basically just stabbed an original through the heart, and that is going to come back on me, and I'm going to die. Like, if we don't leave, I'm dead. And so, like I said earlier, Monique has just been a little bit off through this entire episode, and she's just giving her this look like, when did you lose faith? When did you stop having faith in what these witches are capable of doing in our power and blah, blah, blah. And Monique's like, forget all that. We need to get out of here. And she's like, this is the problem. You tried to stop the harvest all those years ago, or just when the harvest was supposed to happen, you tried to stop it. And you set some of this into motion, and you've never been a full believer. And because of that, she pretty much, as she's talking, you can see Sophie's like choking, and blood is coming out of her nose, and all of a sudden blood starts coming out of her eyes, and she's just basically like, I don't want to leave with you. I want to be with the witches, and I'm not backing down. And she's in for the fight. All of a sudden, you see Sophie collapse to the floor, and she's just basically bleeding out from every orifice of her body. And you're like, that is your niece. That is your aunt. And you just took her out. Wow. I was not expecting that ending. So Monique walks off to be with Celeste and her bandits there, Genevieve and Bastina. and they walk off into the night. And it's like, really, this show means business, and I'm loving every second of it. And what I love is that these witches are just all these women who are just in power, and they don't want to make a deal with the vampires. They want to get rid of the vampires, and they want them gone from New Orleans. And it is just like, whoa, what is left to come? Because, last week I was like, oh, it's sad to see Papa Tunde go, but that was just literally the tip of the iceberg. And I can't wait for when Celeste actually reveals her real self and she comes out of Sabine's body. And of course, what is this going to mean? Like, they're obviously going to try to figure out which witch will bring back Davina. And even if they do bring back Davina, whose side is she going to be on? Is she going to be as angry as Monique is? Is she going to side with with Marcel? Is she going to side with is it going to take the death of Celeste to bring back Davina? Like, what is it all going to mean? So many questions. I mean, it was just a really good episode. And another thing that I wanted to mention was that I'm really enjoying Cammie. At the beginning I was just kind of like, ugh, can't really stand her, but she is just really becoming a solid character that they're starting to flesh out. And I like seeing that she's strong, that she's not backing down. She's even willing to step up to her uncle at first when she sees him talking to Klaus, and she's about to call him out, and now she's really worried about him, so she's about to do anything she can to save her uncle. And it's just great to she's like the one human in all of this madness that's going on. So I like that we have a little bit of a human element in this show right now, outside of all the supernatural craziness that is going on. But guys, I mean, this show is killing it. Every single week is just getting better and better. And I can't wait to see what happens next. It is on fire. Unfortunately, it doesn't come back until February 25th, I think. And so this was kind of like another like mini mid-season like cliffhanger. But whoa, good stuff. I don't think I missed anything. I think I hit everything. But please let me know what you thought of the episode. Wow. I'm loving every single second of it. And I can't wait to see what happens next. All right, guys, that has been my review of the originals, and I'll see you on I guess after the 25th. Thanks. I can't wait. Bye, guys.